tried to hold us back, to hold us, tried to hold us back.
We will be here forever. Do you understand?
This week I catch up with the softly spoken yet powerful, the much loved Andrew H. Alcorn, or better known as AHA. AHA has been responsible for shaping skate culture in Australia for decades. He's repped some of the most iconic brands in the game, connecting global skate culture with local communities. He has sponsored legions of skateboarders over the years and made sure they had a spotlight put on them, launching their careers. And he's someone himself who's avoided the spotlight, but would rather facilitate it for other people. Beyond business, he's still a skater at heart, someone who's stayed rooted in the core values of creativity, connection, and maybe rebellion. And this week, we dive into his origin story, the hustle behind the scenes, and the personal cost and reward of living a life built around passion. So sit back, relax, and get to know AHA.
What makes things seem forever, whether it's unseen, unheard, or 16 again. Not a bother, fill this old man river, kill a flow that gives all. Coming upstream, the quiver. 6 style, easy rock, drop to the floor, lower to the earth.
How are you?
Andrew Alcorn,
Yes.
or are you better known as Mr. Whispers?
Well, that's it depends which circle you mix in.
Really? How'd that nickname come about?
I believe it was coined by some Japanese girls because I had a fairly quiet nature at the time.
Hey.
And then Chad and Harry latched onto it, and the rest is history.
Is that Mark Harris?
Mark Harris, yeah.
Interesting. That's a name I haven't heard in a while.
Yeah, so we're pretty close friends.
Still?
Yeah. Best men at each other's wedding and
Really?
all that sort of thing.
Interesting. How did your relationship originally form?
I was working at Adlon Trading at the time and putting censored skateboards together. And Davo, I was a friend with Davo, and I was looking for riders, so he tracked Harry down and suggested we put him on the team, and yeah.
He was so good.
Yes.
Style.
Yes. Yeah.
He also had a cheeky nature about him from memory. Like he always had like a cheeky smile on his face.
Yeah, he was very...
Is that right?
Very mischievous.
Is he still like that?
Absolutely.
You know, if you reflect on your life and the people that have impacted you the most, what are the characteristics of people you're drawn to? The standout characteristics.
I don't know. I tend to gravitate to people that are interested in skateboarding and bicycles and all the other sort of stuff that I collect and get into.
What about in terms of like their actual values and morals?
Yeah, I guess I know a fairly diverse crew of people from all different backgrounds, and you get along with some people and other people you don't get along with, and the more you spend time with people, the more you get to know them, so you always give people a chance to come out of their shell.
Because you've had a lot of contact with a lot of different people over the years.
Yep.
Through skateboarding predominantly?
Yes. Yeah.
And you've sponsored a lot of skateboarders. You've been responsible for sponsoring a lot of skateboarders.
It's not so much, I wouldn't call it sponsorship always. It's more trying to incubate skaters to progress. So sometimes it's just flowing them a little bit of stuff to help them out and help them on their way and give them a little bit of recognition. And then other times it's trying to sort of push them to that next level and introduce them to companies that can sponsor them further.
Interesting. Was that originally born through working at Adlon?
Yeah. So I guess at the time they were importing a few different brands, and then they were basically a sporting goods importer. They had a ski business where they were doing ski retail and all that sort of thing, and they owned Reflex skateboards, imported Kryptonics and Gullwing trucks and a few things like that, blockhead skateboards.
So were they the first official distributor of skateboarding products in Australia?
No. Oh, they came from the roller skating and ski and winter sports background, so ice skating and all that sort of thing. So obviously brands like Sims and that sort of thing had their foot in both camps, roller skating and skateboarding. And, yeah, they bought the Reflex name off a couple of guys early on and developed that from the late 70s onwards.
Amazing. Are they still they're still in business in the snow realm mainly, aren't they?
No, I think they're more...
Skates.
I think they're more sort of winter sports, so ice hockey and
like ice skates.
Cricket and darts and all that sort of thing. So they're basically a sporting goods importer. I think they're still going.
Are you telling me that skateboarding couldn't sustain them?
Somebody told me a long time ago that businessmen don't want to be skateboarders and skateboarders don't want to be businessmen, and it's like trying to mix oil and water.
You'd know better than anyone else.
Yeah.
I've got so many questions for you in regards to skateboarding and business and industry patterns over the years, but I want to go back to where it all started for you. Like, maybe tell us who you are and where you were born and where you grew up.
All right. I was born in Balmain in the early 1970s, and then I grew up. I think our first house was in Carlingford, but that was only when I was a baby. And then we moved to Melrose Park, which is like a suburb next to West Ryde. So I lived there until about 1985, and then we moved over to Putney, which is sort of a neighbouring suburb back towards Gladesville. Grew up in that area. Smack dab in the middle of Sydney. If you ask any taxi driver where the middle of Sydney is, it's top right. So we weren't far from there. It's sort of 40 minutes from Penrith, Bondi, the Shire, or Monavale.
Yeah, and you're still in the general zone. You haven't really gone too far.
No. So
why would you? It's great.
Well, I don't know. Some people move around a lot, and it's kind of hard to put roots down if you're always on the move.
Yeah, definitely. With your family life, do you have siblings?
I've got a brother and sister, yeah.
Yeah, nice. How would you describe your childhood in those early years? We're talking pre-skateboarding days.
Yeah, it was pretty good. Just growing up, I had a golf course nearby, so, I'd always go and, could just go off and wander and collect golf balls and hustle from an early age, selling them back to the golfers that hit them into the dam.
Dude, I did the same thing growing up at Nowra Golf Course.
Yep. Yeah.
And we had no problem with getting in those seedy ponds.
Yeah, I know.
There's money involved.
That's right. It was always good. You always had a little bit of pocket money. So.
Pretty entrepreneurial.
I think so, yeah.
Do you consider yourself an entrepreneur?
Probably more of a hustler.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know, you'd be one of the most subtle hustlers.
That's right. I try not to be too pushy.
How would you define hustling?
Well, you're just always out there, you've got to pay the bills and you've got to get the money from somewhere. So, you've got to have the work ethic to sort of bring enough in to get by. I'm not particularly greedy or want to, make a bazillion dollars, but, as long as I've got enough to get by and, you've got to do what you got to do sometimes.
How much of it is driven by doing things that you enjoy and not things you have to be doing?
I think it depends on the bills coming in that week. You've got to do what you got to do and try and find something you can do that you enjoy. But it can be challenging, and you can lose the passion for things that you love if you have to try and survive off it. So that's something that you've got to keep in mind.
That's something I think about a lot with friends that own skate shops or work in the industry.
Yes.
I'm not talking about sponsored skateboarders. I'm talking about people who are the behind-the-scenes guys.
Yep.
Or like our mutual friend Ty we were talking about, who owns a skate shop,
Yes.
And does it pollute the passion? And I mean, for you, it seems like it hasn't, but I'm sure it has.
There are times when you're just like, I've had enough, I'm going to throw it in. It's sort of go and find something else to do that's, I sometimes envy people that just turn up and go to work and they don't have to think about what they're doing too much. They just do their job and go home, and, that's, there's something in that too, I think.
Yeah. Were you a good student at school?
I think I was a challenging student at school.
Why?
I don't know, maybe there were periods where I had some behavioural issues and that sort of thing. So, it's sort of hard to sort of focus on things that I didn't really want to do or didn't find stimulating or challenging.
Yeah, that's such a commonality. Were your parents pushing you in an academic sort of way, or?
Well, my mum was a registered nurse and my dad was a aircraft engineer.
For an airline, major airline?
Yes, for Qantas.
Qantas.
Yeah. So he was, at the time of his retirement, he was the longest serving employee at Qantas. He
Amazing.
Worked there for 57 years.
Wow, as an engineer.
Yep. So straight out of school as an apprentice and then stayed there until he retired in 2014.
Wow, that's amazing. Listen, I don't want to bring this up to upset you, but my condolences on the loss of your father recently.
Yeah, yep.
Do you mind if I ask how you're navigating that? Because everyone experiences that kind of loss in their life at some time.
He, from probably about 2019 onwards, he was diagnosed with vascular dementia.
Okay.
And then he went into a home, I think it was 2021. He sort of had a fall and, I always said he could stay at home as long as it's safe and nothing happened. But, once that happened, he had to go into a home. So that was pretty challenging for everyone because he didn't want to go. And, it's just like, well, it's kind of your, that's pretty challenging. So he was in the home for a few years and, they did a pretty good job looking after him. There was few incidents, but no major issues.
My father passed a few years ago, and it really put me in a place of reflection in regards to my relationship with him.
Yep.
Has that happened for you?
Yeah, we had a pretty good relationship. I never really had a grandfather, so I used to visit with the kids all the time. So I wanted them to have a sort of relationship that I never had with a grandfather. So we'd visit him a couple of times a week or take him out for lunch or, do all that sort of stuff. So we had some good times. We had a scare probably about 3 years ago. He got really ill and, we thought time's up and, went to see the funeral home to make all the plans and all that sort of thing. And he sort of bounced back from palliative care, which was, it happens, but it's not, it doesn't happen all the time. So we were lucky we got another 3 years with him, so he was just too stubborn to go,
Are you stubborn?
Absolutely.
In what way, though?
I'll hold my ground if I believe in something and, I'll dig my heels in if people want to go the other direction sometimes. So.
Do you navigate conflict well?
Sometimes. I've had my moments.
We all do.
Yeah.
We all do. Some do navigate conflict better than others.
Yes.
And I guess too in the business realm, it's inevitable, right?
Yep. Yeah. Sometimes people can push your buttons and the red mist starts coming down, and you're going to be a bit like Godzilla and start charging up and go thermonuclear.
There's the first Godzilla reference.
That's right.
So Mick Mulhall says you love Godzilla. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Why? Why Godzilla?
I don't know. I just always remembered it from when I was a kid and, just loved Japanese culture and I guess the story behind Godzilla, how it's sort of...
I don't even know exactly what it is, man.
The first Godzilla movie came out in the 1950s, so it was just after Japan had been bombed with nuclear weapons and... the whole concept behind it was nature will take its revenge if you don't look after nature.
I didn't realise that because Godzilla was born from the earth. Is that
he was just like some mutant
earth
iguana
creature
that got zapped by nuclear energy.
It was an iguana.
Supposedly.
There's a new learn. I'd never been a Godzilla guy.
Yeah. So I was really into it, and I've had friends that have been big Godzilla fans over the years, and every time I go to Japan, I collect a couple of movie monster figurines to add to the collection.
Yeah, that's rad.
Yeah.
You seem like a bit of a collector. We're in your beautiful house. Some of the collection of skateboards you showed me this morning are just like mind blowing.
Yeah. Yep. So no, I collect all sorts of stuff. I got that from my dad. My dad was a mad collector of tools and bikes and had all sorts of weird collections of stuff.
What are you drawn to in regards to that sentimentality? Is that what it is primarily? Or is it appreciation?
I don't know. I think it's more the thrill of the chase, trying to find stuff,
Like the rarity?
Yeah. There's a few people out there. I remember talking to Wade Burkett about it a few years ago and, finding those iconic vans that nobody else had or the one-offs and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just trying to find, stuff that you don't have or stuff that fits into your collection that's a bit odd.
Yeah. Thank you for that package of zines you sent me, by the way.
Yep, no worries.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to talk about, like, when did your love for zines come about? Has that always been there?
Well, that's come through skateboarding back in the 1980s. So, you'd get the skateboard magazine, the Australian ones, Slam and Australian Skateboarding and all those magazines and Thrasher and Transworld. And I think Thrasher and Transworld in particular used to have articles about zines and all that sort of thing. So I've always been hugely influenced by Todd Swank. He did Swank Zine back in the day. So early on, as a teenage kid, we were trying to mimic that. And yeah, so I think the first zines I ended up doing weren't until 1990 that we actually started doing them. So we didn't have any local photographers or anything like that. So we just made our own magazine for skateboarding called Sloth Zine.
Sloth Zine?
Yep. And that ran for maybe 20 issues or so.
What year? Just...
I think the first one came out early 1990 and then probably did it for 4 years after that.
Yeah, epic. Do you think it ties in with that desire to collect as well or document?
No, I think it's more creating something to share.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a whole zine culture out there. There's just zine dudes that, they have zine fairs over at, I went to one over at Marrickville a couple of years ago and, people make zines about all sorts of stuff. It's not just skate and punk zines.
I think collecting stuff is a form of documenting as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I think when you create a zine, you're creating an artifact in a way. And
that's right, yeah.
Which then becomes a collector's item.
Yeah. There's definitely zine collectors out there. I've got, a little collection of different zines from different people, different topics and all that sort of thing, Over the COVID period, it was good. I was just hunting down different zines over Instagram and all that sort of thing and getting in touch with people, and you'd send them a package and you'd get a package back in the mail. So it's there's an exchange with zines, which we try and, so it's actually led to a few interesting relationships that I wouldn't have had over the years just by swapping zines and that sort of thing.
Yeah, epic. Would you ever read an online skate article?
Yeah, I do all the time.
You do? All the time?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, Jenkum, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. See, I don't, but...
Right.
I'll sit and read it, like a hard copy of Thrasher, Slam.
Yeah, yep.
And zines. I've got other friends that are into zines as well.
Yeah, I still get a subscription to Thrasher, so I like the hard copy of that. But, like I said, Jenkum and some of those other magazines, there's some really, really cool stuff out there.
Yeah, Jenkum.
Articles that you wouldn't see elsewhere, people, because it's so easy to sort of type something up and publish it online, that content generation sort of mentality.
Do you think the quality of writing is the same? Like, do you think the effort has gone into the research and the actual
I think you get more long-form articles online because zines, you're limited by the amount of space on the page, so and you're limited by the age of your audience and how small the print can be that they can actually read. So if you're doing an A5 zine, you've got to keep in mind that, 40, 50-year-old dudes are going to read it and their eyesight's not what it used to be.
Says us with our new glasses.
That's right.
Yeah, I never.
So it's just a different platform to, create stuff with. So.
Yeah, it's epic, man. I love it. I so love it. I want to go back again to what high school did you go to?
So I'll give you the whole rundown. So when I was living at Melrose Park, I went to Melrose Park Primary. Then I went across to West Ryde Primary. And then I went to Malvina High School, which was actually just a high school in Ryde. It was on Malvina Street. So people go, you went to some fancy school called Malvina. I'm like, no.
It does sound fancy.
They call it Ryde Secondary College now. They've rebadged it. So,
public school, though?
Yeah, all public schools.
Yep. What subjects did you, excel at?
I love techniques, so metalwork, woodwork, art. I really loved general science, and I did quite well. I probably should have been doing, physics and chemistry and stuff like that because I really enjoy the sciences. Art and techniques were my sort of favourite go-tos.
Didn't have a desire to follow the same path as your father?
When I left high school, I went and did a fitting and machining apprenticeship. So I did 4 years with Johnson & Johnson over at Botany.
Did you leave in year 10?
No. I went right through to year 12. So I did that, and then part of that apprenticeship I went into tool making. So I did tool making for 6 months as well.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that was my dad's influence, it's sort of old school. Always got to have a trade to fall back on.
Yeah, that was the mantra.
Yep.
I mean, it still is the mantra.
Yeah. So at that time too, I was still working with Adlon and, presenting ideas. We wanted to get censored skateboards up and running. And
well, that's what I wanted to ask you. When did you start at Adlon? Were you...
would have been around...
You'd finished school?
No. It was when I was at school. It was like a weekend and school holiday job. So the first job I had when I was in high school was working at Red Rooster, and that sucked. So I couldn't eat chicken for about 2 years after I worked there. But I had a friend, Murray, and he just fluked this job at the ski factory in Rozelle, which was Adlon's retail business there. So, I just used to go and hang out, and one day they're like, we've got a little skate shop at the front and we need a new rack, and Murray's like, my friend Aha can build a rack. You're always building stuff. So I built them a rack, and I just used to hang around there, and then one day I just got handed a box and it's like, here you go, carry this, unload the... I'm like, I don't even work here, and just hang around till they put you on the payroll.
So you did some free work?
No, they paid me to make the rack and stuff like that.
But because you were just around.
Yeah, and then it was weird. They sort of wanted artwork for reflex projects and stuff like that. So I'd just hand draw a skate wheel, and I thought it was just a rough draft. And then 2 months later, a bunch of wheels had turned up with it. I'm like, I didn't even finish it. It was just an idea. So it was pretty funny.
So would you say it's a case of right place, right time?
I think it's just hanging around. Like I said, hang around till they put you on the payroll.
Yeah. My dad said that to me when I was a kid. He's like, you want something? He goes, if there's a place you really want to work, just go and tell them you'll work there for free.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? Imagine saying that to kids nowadays.
Yeah. Well, you could. Why not?
If you really want it.
One of my philosophies that I'm always telling people, just get up, dress up, show up,
Yeah. Had you already started skateboarding then?
Yeah.
So how old were you when you started skating? Tell us that story.
First skateboard I got was just like a little red plastic number from Coles New World. My mum bought it for Christmas in 1980. So that was my first board. There was a guy across the road, Keith Napper, that had a fiberglass golden breed board. And that was I was just like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever seen, And then later on, I remember he got a wide board, which was a reflex dragon stick, and that was the first. I was like, look, this thing's off the chart. I didn't know what it was or why it was wide, or but I was just fascinated. And
reflex were like the premium. If you had a reflex,
I guess so. Yeah. Well, there was sort of there was all the American brands that were being bought in, Santa Cruz and Powell and all that sort of stuff. Date back you know.
But what actually, like, when was the first time you actually, like, seen skateboarding and then went, oh, my God, I've got to do that? Or was it just the fact that your mum seen a skateboarder?
I remember my family was fairly churchy, in the Uniting Church and stuff like that. And I remember we went to a film night one time and they had this, like, just old 1970s era skateboarding and in a full pipe. And I remember this film because they had the full pipe upside down, and then it looked like, and I was thinking, what's going on here? You know, trying to. But yeah. So that was kind of the first thing, and then, like I said, I just had that little plastic board, so you know, you just butt board around. And then when I was in high school, you know, you're just trying to find your identity and that sort of thing. And there was a few of the surf kids that had wide, like, Aussie boards. And I remember this guy had this really wide board with Mighty Mouse painted on the bottom. And I'd see him bombing the hill, and then to slow down, he'd just, like, carve out onto the grass. And I was like, I've got to do that. I can do that. That looks pretty fun.
That's epic.
So I just bought a friend of mine was selling a Redstone skateboard, which was just like a horrible department store board.
Yeah.
So I bought that, and early on I'd always just pull stuff apart, and because my dad was an engineer, you know, just had all the tools to do it and pull it apart, and I'd always reshape decks when I got them, you know, and yeah, so that was my first wide board. And then I think after that my mum bought me a board called a Nash Fly Me, which had flamingos and palm trees on the bottom, and she's like, this is the last skateboard I ever buy you. And I'm like, okay. So I reshaped it into what I thought looked like a Christian Hosoi deck. You know, I saw one at Skateboard World, and, you know, we'd go over there to buy bearings or, you know, just little things to upgrade, you know. So, and then the first decent board I got was a Gordon and Smith foil tail. So it was in the sale bin at Surf Dive and Ski in the city. So I didn't have much money, you know, didn't sell enough golf balls that month.
Which golf course, out of curiosity?
Ride Parramatta. And we used to travel out and go to, like, Massey Park and you know, North Ride, wherever. Wherever you'd go until the greenkeepers would catch you and kick you out.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's funny because I used to get golf balls at the Nowra golf course, and I remember I moved to Sydney when I was like 17.
Yep.
And I still had that golf ball mentality.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I remember seeing the golf course at Bondi.
Oh, yep.
And I remember thinking, I wonder what the pro shop pays for balls there.
Yeah, yeah.
We're in the rich part of town.
Yeah. No, the pro shop never paid well. So
No, yeah.
You're better off hustling with the golfers on the course.
Oh, is that what you were doing?
Yeah, direct.
Oh, see, rookie.
Yeah,
rookie
yeah,
era.
yeah.
Yeah.
They'd hit their ball in the dam and you'd fish it out.
Yeah.
Come on, $2.
Yeah. Or you'd hide in the bushes, and then they'd hit it in the bushes and just steal it before they could find it.
Yeah.
Take a draw. No, I'm joking.
I think we might have tried that a few times but got in trouble.
No, we did that. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So then your relationship with Adelong, because I mean, that was a pretty long-standing position you held there.
Probably from, like I said, it would have been 87, 88 through to 99. Yeah. So when I was just finishing off my apprenticeship, skateboarding sort of came back from that sort of dead, 89 through to 93 era. So it was making a bit of a comeback, and, I'd suggested a few brands and they'd gone out and acquired those.
Which ones?
They were doing Spitfire.
So they brought Spitfire in originally?
Well, a lot of those companies in the States were selling to multiple distributors in Australia at the time. So I remember they got Spitfire briefly, and then there was Ron Allen's company called Fun, Follow Under Nobody. So they were doing that, but they weren't allowed to do real, or I think they were doing stereo at the time. I think Koala was doing all that stuff. So... And then they sort of gave all the Spitfire stuff exclusively over to Koala, so they were searching out new brands.
Koala really hit the scene hard and then just dominated for a few years there, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. Because
then they were the first to get DC shoes as well.
Yeah,
That must have been huge for them.
Yep, and they'd been distributing Blockhead
Black Label, World Industries.
Oh, no, this is Adlon.
Oh, Adlon, sorry.
Yeah. So they were distributing Blockhead, which was being done through Tracker. And then that turned into Invisible skateboards. And then Q-Day came in and I don't know if they snatched it off them, but like I said, they were selling to 2 different distributors and then they just decided to go with one. So they lost some brands in a fairly short space. So it was up to, they asked me if I'd go to the ASR trade show and try and find some new brands. I'd been to the ASR trade show. One of the guys there used to go there all the time.
Dude, what were they like back in the day?
They were fun, and then because I was a Qantas brat, I could get cheap airfares.
I was going to say you were on 10% flights,
something like that. Yeah, you could fly to LA for a couple of $100.
But wait up, didn't they just pay for you to go over?
Well, the first time I said I'll just pay my own way. If you take me along for the ride, just so I can, just go over and rub shoulders with all the pros, and have a look at all the new products and that sort of stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, because like the trade shows were the thing that really brought the industry, and that's when all the new videos would be released often, and you'd see all the latest progressions in skateboarding, right? Because we weren't really getting fed much here.
Yeah, new brands would always debut there, so there was the opportunity to go and pick stuff up. So the first time I went, we just they were still doing Gullwing, and then I remember we went to a premiere for Full Power Trip, which was the Gullwing video. So when I was a kid, we were all Gullwing dudes. So I just followed all the Gullwing team and that sort of thing.
Can I quiz you quickly?
Yep.
My first ever proper skateboard, my first ever skateboard was an old Veriflex.
Yep.
But then my dad bought me a Lance Mountain Power Peralta Bonite board with a brand new set of gull wings.
Yeah,
and they were the ones with the plastic base plate and the ridge in the middle of them. Like
so they'd either be Pro 3s or Phoenixes. Yeah.
Okay. Because I still to this day can't remember exactly what they were.
Yep.
I was never, at the time I was only like 12, so I don't remember.
Yeah. They had 2 different trucks. So the Phoenixes were more upright pivot, so they turned a little bit different, a little bit sharper, more like an Indy, I guess. And then the Pro 3s were more like a tracker geometry, so a little bit more stable, which is why a lot of the vert guys ride them. When they're doing big airs and throwing it down, the truck's a lot more stable. So, they had a pretty heavy-hitting team, but they were sort of the underdog company as well. Sort of Tracker and Indy dominated the market back then.
They did, didn't they?
Gullwing was sort of like the alternative dudes, but they had a killer team.
Thunder did okay.
Yeah, Thunder and Venture sort of came in. Yeah, funny story, I guess, is that Ermico, which was the foundry there, was run by Fausto, who started Thrasher and all that sort of thing. And then he released Venture and Thunder as new truck brands, competing against Indy, which he sort of had, because I think he was only half owner with NHS and Indy. So you sort of introduced these 2 new truck brands to compete with the other brand. Just sort of gave them the opportunity to sort of expand and get different riders and that sort of thing. And, pretty soon they were the 3 dominating truck brands,
No way. See, I didn't know that. Yeah. I didn't know. That's, oh, God, man. So there's nuances.
Yeah. And then I guess
most people wouldn't even consider.
Yeah. So Tracker and Gullwing, they still ran with the original owners till the early 2000s. And then I think Sector 9 bought Gullwing and Max Dufour bought Tracker. They never really kept going for too long after that. So.
Well, then Indy just completely dominated, but then it seems like in more recent years, what trucks do you think are giving Indy a run for their money?
Well, I've been making sure that's Ace trucks.
I was leading into that.
I sort of... Ever since they started, I was working with Goliath since about 2003, distributing stuff and just working as a sales rep. And I'd always been pestering Pete at Goliath. I'm like, got to get Ace. This is the only truck that's going to, compete with Indy Venture.
What was that based on?
I just knew the history. So Joey Terche, who was with Independent for a long time, was behind it. And then a guy that I used to deal with a little bit at Deluxe. I didn't deal a lot with him, but I've got to know him over the last couple of years is Shroogie, so Steve Rouge. So he was the Thunder and Spitfire guy for Deluxe for a long time. So basically the Ace truck had the Thunder and Indy DNA. So, but they were kind of doing their own thing as well. So they, yeah.
Well, I ride Ace trucks now. I'm on my second set.
I know. I've got something for you here because I listened to your Swellbows thing and you said they were a bit twitchy.
Well, it's funny. They still veer, and then I changed the rubbers out.
It's all right. We can sort that out.
But it could just be a rubber thing. Like we don't. Oh, he's got some rubbers for me.
For the people that can't see what's going on, so these are the hard cushions. So they're a 94 Duro. So when you get,
so the ones that got the real white ones.
yes,
Yeah, okay.
86 Duro bottom, 91 Duro top.
Yeah.
So they're fairly soft. So Ace are designed to be ridden loose straight out of the cabinet.
Okay.
They're the only truck that's designed that way.
Yeah.
So if you don't ride loose trucks and you just ride them straight out of the cabinet, you'll hate them. They'll be too twitchy and they'll feel weird.
Okay.
So
see, I'm one of those people who don't consider these little things. I'm just like, give me whatever works.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. So if you want to crank your trucks down or tighten them, firm them up, then you've got to put a hard bushing in.
Okay.
So they're all 94s.
Yes, sir.
So Leon Paxton actually did a really good video about that. He's like, I couldn't ride Ace, and then I put it works.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, yeah. Then also in there's a couple of experimental prototype ones, top cushions only.
Okay. So keep the same bottom cushion.
Well, the bottom cushion's the one that does all the work. So
Yeah.
when you're standing on your board, all the pressure's on the lot. The
So
top one
what's
just
the top one doing?
It just stops your hanger from flopping around. So
But day one,
you don't even
day one don't
yeah,
care.
you don't need it. Yeah.
Don't need to be like day one though.
But,
just
you
take
know,
it out.
Who wants to ride janky, rattly trucks, you know? So, but you can adjust the way they turn by using different duros in the top as well.
I must admit though, I went skating the other night, and yeah, like I feel like they were starting to like. I think I tinkered with the tightness a little bit.
Yep.
Because they just felt like they were stiff one direction.
Yep.
And then the other way they were great.
Yeah.
And then I tinkered with them a little bit, and I was like, oh yeah, it feels better. But I mean, I do like them. Actually, the other question I've got for you. So there's the hollow axle and the hollow kingpin. Yeah. What are those ones called?
No, it's just the Ace AF1 hollow.
The AF1 hollows.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what I've got.
Yeah, so AF1s, they're sort of top-end material.
Yeah.
So it's a different casting process that they use for the truck.
Yeah.
So they say it's the strongest truck on the market for that. Yeah. So
Yeah, why would I, like these days, like I only want to buy hollow axles and hollow kingpins.
yeah, I don't like hollow axles.
I was going to say, why would... Okay.
Well, just when your board skids along the side, the axle tends to get damaged a little bit more if it's hollow. Mm-hmm. Solid axle.
You don't mind the extra weight? Is it making a difference to your life?
Well, my theory is if you're complaining about the weight of your trucks, you're spending too much time with it under your arm instead of standing on top of it.
Good answer.
But some people like light trucks, and then, even some divert dudes prefer a heavier truck because when they're throwing their board up, it's got a bit of oomph behind it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I wonder if it's giving vert guys and bowl guys more stability. Because I know Swellbows is riding not hollow.
Yeah. I don't think it makes a lot of difference.
It is flying around. So look, I want to ask you then, so you've given us a bit of history, and how you got started in the industry.
Yep.
How did it then eventually lead into launching? Was it then Censored? So Censored was during Adlon times, right?
Yes.
But then you went off and started C4 International, is that right?
C4 was just a business name. That was going to be a little clothing project that I was going to do with Censored, and then it never eventuated. So I just used that name for my business. So yeah, so I sort of I work independently, on a commission basis when I'm selling stuff for other companies. So yeah, it's just my business name.
Okay, right. So you started it after you left Adlon, is that correct? Or
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the way Censored came about, most of my job at Adlon when I was at school was just going there and grip taping skateboards, making truck and wheel assemblies, screen printing skateboards, putting grip tape, just assembling all the reflex boards. And, there was other jobs we used to do. They used to wax skis for all the different ski shops around Sydney. And, they'd import soccer boots and you'd have to cut all the studs off to turn them into speed skates, roller skates and that sort of thing. So it was a pretty interesting and diverse, just all hands on deck, whatever needed to be done, you'd be doing. So
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I never considered that.
Yeah.
In my mind, because I'm so narrow-minded, I was like, oh, they're the Adelon's all skateboarding.
Yeah. So originally the factory was just a couple of blocks away in Roselle.
Yeah.
So I'd go there after school and I'd make skateboards back then with paper skins on the board instead of painting the board. And then I'd have to go in and just, roll the edges with lacquer to seal the boards. So funny story, I don't know if it's true or not, but yeah, so there was a few companies, Aussie and Reflex and, a few other brands that were doing these boards with a paper skin on it, which is like when you see form ply, it's got that brown paper on it. So that sort of seals the board off and protects it from moisture and that sort of thing. So it's just a sort of a cheaper way of doing it rather than the next step of painting the whole board. And the story was George Powell came to Australia and saw those boards and he goes, oh, this paper stuff, and having a look at it. And apparently that's what he used for bonite.
Bullshit.
So that's the story. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's what I heard. So yeah. So terrible idea putting it on the inside of the board because it doesn't bond it doesn't hold the board together. And if the board gets wet, the paper gets a bit weird.
It gets soggy.
Yeah. So there's not many fans of actual skateboarders riding bonite boards. But,
to this day, I wish I kept that. I wish I kept that board, even ridden.
Yeah.
I remember seeing because I had no idea. And I remember because I had a tail pad.
Yep.
In the day, and then I remember after skating that, I ground it down after doing tail skids.
Yes.
And then my friend, it was Cameron Guzev.
Yep.
Went, you know what? I'm taking the tail pad off my board.
Yep.
They're not cool anymore.
Yeah.
Oh shit! I better do the same thing. And then I'm like, so you start to wear your tail down, and I'm like, oh, there's this black layer in there. What is that?
Yeah.
And I remember picking at it, going, it feels like cardboard.
Yep.
No, and he's like, it's bonite, man. That's the best. That's the best quality of skateboard money can buy. I was like,
fantastic marketing from George Powell.
Yeah, it's classic. I talk about it a lot on here because it's never been seen again.
Yeah.
And then I remember the other thing that blew my mind in terms of skateboard innovation was when Monty Nolder had the slick bottom.
Oh,
that was the first slick
Yeah,
bottom.
yeah,
Do you remember the Monty Nolder slick bottom?
Was that a BBC board? Or?
BBC, yeah.
So all the companies started doing the slick bottoms around
Slick
that
bottom, but it
time,
was really thick and heavy.
Yeah.
But we just thought that
I
was
think
like...
maybe Santa Cruz was first to market with that.
Was it?
Yeah, I remember there was a dressing board and Tom Knox board. Yeah.
Because I remember we were just like, wow, like what are they going to think of next? This is so groundbreaking.
Yeah. But sort of within a year or so, all the different companies had, slick bottom decks around that time.
Yeah, I was at Scott Springs a few weeks ago and he had an old Jason Lee slick bottom with the rip-off of the Burger King.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
And he found it.
Fortune,
he found it like someone was throwing it out.
Wow. Yeah.
And they'd actually had holes drilled in it because they'd made a kid's swing out of it.
Oh. There's a kid swing, a penny board on a tree up the street. So skateboards make great swings.
Yeah. Isn't it? It's amazing. Yeah. But and that was something I wanted to talk to you about because in terms of innovation, I know Powell have been trying to bring out, be innovative again with that, Andy Anderson.
The flight decks.
Yeah. What are your thoughts? Do you think we just keep it simple?
I love it when companies try new stuff. You're never going to progress anywhere. But with skateboard decks, we always come back to 7-ply. It's 7-ply maple. It just works. It's a great material, and the boards hold together well. And so it's a pretty amazing timber. We tried back when we were first looking at doing stuff with sensitive. We were making boards in Australia, but we just couldn't get any Australian hardwoods or anything that would have those same characteristics. Nice, hard, dent resistant and tight grain and that sort of thing. We got pretty close with a couple of the Australian, but they just wouldn't hold up as well. So yeah. But they make guitars and kitchen bench tops and all that sort of thing out of it, and it's a pretty amazing timber.
So you're with Adelon till 1999.
Yep.
And I mean, in my mind, I feel like street skating started to really boom in Australia in the early 90s. Like, I know we had the Depression, but then after 93, in my mind, that's when, for me, it was always like the blind video came out, blind video days, and then everyone wanted to be street skaters.
Yeah, so that's the era when we made prototypes and, I was doing all sorts of graphic ideas and that sort of thing through 91, 92. So we would have launched late 92, early 93.
Was Adelong saying to you, can you go and sponsor some skaters for us?
No, I was pushing them to do that.
You were pushing them.
Yeah, so they had Reflex, and I'm going, nobody's going to ride Reflex. This brand, we can do it as an entry-level skate brand, but, if you want to capture the sort of better skaters and that sort of thing, we're going to have to come up with something new. So I had that concept of censored, and you know what you're like when you're a kid. You've got exercise books full of ideas and drawings and what deck shape, because of deck shapes back then.
And who was the first censored skater? Harry was the
Mark
first.
Harris, yeah.
Wow.
Mark
who else
Harris,
did you have?
Mark Harris, Skunk, and Peanut.
Yes.
And then Dave Rocks. They were the first four. So the idea was try and get skaters from different areas. So you had Harry representing the city and inner west, and then you had Skunk representing the western suburbs. He was out at Bass Hill, and then you had Peanut up on the Insular Peninsula, up in the northern beaches there.
Insular Peninsula. It really is.
It is.
I mean,
nobody,
Manly's
once you go there,
Manly's
there's no need to go anywhere else, right?
Oh, it's magic up there. Yeah, I wouldn't want to leave either.
Yep. So that was the idea, and then of course Dave Rocks he was one of the Borcos, so yeah.
Insane, dude.
Yep. So I offered Dave a spot, but he was sort of pretty hooked up with. He was doing a lot of stuff with hardcore, and he was pretty well looked after back then. You didn't really need anything, so so he used to be sort of Nathan Ho and Davo used to be my talent scouts.
Because you worked in the SDS in the city, right?
That was after Adlon. Yeah.
Was that with Nathan Ho?
No, he'd been gone.
He'd already left
prior. So Davo was working there, and then after I left Adlon, I was sort of at a bit of a loss what to do, and
Did you keep Censored going? You did, didn't you?
No. I just left Adlon, and they kept the brand and all that sort of thing. And then Brett Margaritas came in, and he was writing for Think, which was one of the brands that we were distributing at the time.
Yeah. And
he came in and filled my position after that, and he kept Censored going a little bit. And then Kerry Fisher came on board, and he was doing Criminal, so it was a similar sort of thing. So I think he was probably
him and Glenn Scott.
Yeah. So they kept it going for a little bit, but so those guys were pretty tough to deal with, and it was I wouldn't call it a corporate environment, but it wasn't sort of as friendly as it could be towards skaters,
Yeah.
So it's challenging working with those people all the time. So.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. So after I left, I'd been selling stuff to Surf Dive and Ski for a long time. So there was a guy there that gave me a break, Steve Gulliver. So I owe him big time. He schooled me. He was super tough. So hard but fair. But
so can we just clarify a little bit in terms of you were desperate for a job? You needed a job.
Well, yeah.
You weren't desperate, but you needed work.
Yeah.
So, and he gave you the opportunity to work there.
Well, no, it was more because I had a fairly good relationship with them through selling stuff to them. They were a customer, and I was a supplier, so we had that relationship going, and they knew that I had pretty good insight into how the industry worked and behind the scenes how much stuff cost and pricing and all that sort of thing. So it was an advantage for me to work there for them. So Yeah, so after I left Adlon, I can't remember if it was Chad Ford or Davo said, "Oh, Tom wants to have a meeting with you." And there was a clothing buyer there called Tommy, and I thought that's who they were talking about. So he was sort of he was doing the clothing, and then Steve Gulliver was doing the hardware. So I sort of went to this meeting, and they go, "Oh no, it's Tom Cypress, and he's the guy that started Surf Dive and Ski and General Pants and all that sort of thing." So I was like, "Oh, I didn't, I'd hardly ever talked to Tom, Yeah, and he sort of said, "Oh, Davo's going to uni. We need somebody to work the skate counter in George Street on the weekends." So so I ended up working with them for about 5 years.
Epic. So when you were there, some skaters that would know. So Davo worked there part-time.
Yep.
Nathan Hode left. Was Sid Tapia working there?
Yeah, I worked with Sid quite a bit.
He was like part-time as well, wasn't he?
Yep. Phil Mackey.
Did Mick Ewan work there?
No, I've got a feeling Steve Teeny worked there briefly, maybe.
All I know is I just thought all those guys that worked at Surf Dive in George Street specifically was just like so cool. Like if you had that job, you were just the coolest person I know. Yeah.
So it was, it's sort of big shoes to fill on, it's a real personality base, that's sort of what brings the kids in. They'd come in to, hang out with Davo or Nathan or whoever was working there, because I remember when I was at high school, they had a shop over in Chatswood. So we'd catch the bus to Chatswood every afternoon. There was a skater there, Matt Davis. And he was working there. I think Mick and Danny Way – oh, it's not Danny Way, Danny Van. So Mick Mulhall and Danny Van worked there as well. But, we sort of got on pretty well with Matt Davis. He was riding for Blockhead through Adlon. We'd give him boards. So I'd, go and pick boards up from Adlon and deliver them over to Matt. And we'd just hang out in the shop and just torment him all afternoon. Just groms, But so it was good times.
It is good times. Far out, It's just I want to actually just ask quickly pry a little bit with the SDS and General Pants stuff, because I remember when SDS started, I felt like they started strong. They had a lot of backing. Like, what eventually happened with them? They got really big. Did they go corporate? Did they sell off?
Tom sold the business, So
who did he sell to? Like one of those major surf brands?
He'd sold General Pants a couple of years prior. So this was around 2004. So he'd sold the business to General Pants.
Yep.
There's sort of a lot of sort of families that are sort of well-connected, eastern suburbs families and that sort of thing. So they'd sell one business to one and then back to the other and all that sort of thing. So he sold Surf Dive and Ski around that time to the guy that owned General Pants.
Okay.
And then it later got sold to
I feel like it was a big
board riders, Billabong. And
I thought it was a big surf brand.
So they're the owner of the Surf Dive and Ski shops these days.
Yeah. Interesting, man.
They're sort of exited out of skate completely. So, they do their own brand, a bit of Element in DC, but they don't really support skateboarding anymore.
I like your Dogtown T-shirt.
Thank you.
Do you know any of the original Dogtown skateboarders?
I'm lucky enough to have met Jim last year, so I've got to know him because we're distributing Dogtown now. So
amazing.
Got to go out to the warehouse, and I always fanboy out when I meet people like that.
Hell yeah!
So
what about Tony Alva from back in the day, though? Yeah,
so that's got a bit of a story there. So I think the first time I went to an ASR trade show, after the trade show, Tracker had put on a thing called Grassroots, which was just like a little barbecue day up at the Tracker warehouse in Oceanside there. So I used to go out and take my little Canon sure shot camera, little automatic, and take some photos. They had a mini ramp, and there was always a few good skaters skating. And then one day I went there and John Lucero and Tony Alva were there. So on that trip, the day I arrived to do the trade show, one of my best friends was killed in a motorcycle accident.
Sorry to hear that.
So I was sort of stuck in San Diego, and I'm like, it's just got to toughen up and do what you got to do. And there's no point just flying back and blowing the whole trip, or there's nothing you can do when that sort of stuff happens. And I remember I went to the grassroots thing and I took a few photos, and Tony Alva just got talking to him, and he's like, "Oh, you all right?" And I'm like, just through this stuff, best friend just got killed, and so he gave me this pep talk. Right, you've got to just go out there and live and love life, and so yeah. And then he gave me a zine.
Zines, man, they're the thing that brings people together.
Yeah. And then
they really are.
So I remember I sent him back a zine, and and then he'd send another one back in the mail, and he was looking at he's redoing Alva, so he'd sort of split from John Fallahy, who did all those sort of iconic 1980s Alva boards, and he was just doing this little version of Alva there. So it was in that real small wheels era, so it was quite funny, sort of, he was getting all upset because he had to ride 45 mil wheels because that's all that was available, and how do you skate a pool with little tiny wheels and that sort of thing. So he was one of the few people that was still producing good directional boards around that time, which there was still a bit of a demand for. And then as he got that back up and running, I contacted him and sort of said, "Oh, can we distribute Alva boards?" And so we took it from there, and
legendary.
And I sent him this weird letter, and I'm like, when you gave me that little pep talk and told me, that really sort of helped me, and so we became good friends, and then so a couple of years later, I was bringing out all the Think guys to do a tour. So we did a tour from Queensland down to Melbourne, and I was playing from left field, and I'm going, I had a bit of money, so I was like, I'm going to buy Tony Alva a plane ticket, and made him an offer, and I'm like, look, if I buy a plane ticket, will you come out and come on tour with us? And he's like, yeah, okay.
Great.
So he came out, and we went on a tour.
Did you stay at your house?
Yeah, I had a little shoebox flat in Balmain, which there's a lot of funny stuff. I've had like 6 people sleeping in, a little studio apartment and that sort of thing. But any time anybody would come to town, I'd try and put them up. We had a little fold-out couch, and it was
special. So you went on tour, you're on tour with Alva.
Well, so he flew into Sydney, and then we drove up to Queensland. So
what year are we talking here? Give me an era.
Look, I'm going to say 96, 97 probably. No, it would have been 96, I think, yeah. So we'd drive up. All the Think guys flew into Gold Coast.
Yep.
So we went to meet them there. So I took Skunk and I'm going to say Harry in the van with Tony Alva. So basically the reason I liked Alva was like when I was stripping back skateboarding, it's like, right, who's the influence? So he's kind of one of the first guy to be documented doing a frontside air. And I'm going, so you start stripping it back further than that, and you're going into people like Russ Howell, and I'm like, nobody wants to see that guy anymore.
His handstands are insane,
he's
dude.
still skateboarding and killing it, But
I wonder if he's still doing handstands. How old is he, like 70?
Yeah, well and truly into his 70s, I'd say. But he's still active. He goes to all the freestyle contests and stuff like that. So, but probably not as marketable as Alva always had that, that sort of raw attitude, and, it's just get in there and do it. And, so, yeah.
You think that was good for the younger crew to see?
Well, this was before Dogtown and Z-Boys and that whole movie sort of era came out. So my theory was, if you want to get schooled on where skateboarding came from and how it all got together, you're going to get locked in a van with Tony Alva for 5 hours. And, that's...
See, it's interesting that you kind of could see that. I don't know. It's like you've seen the brand and before it sort of blew up. I don't know. I think that's maybe. Have you ever been described as sort of visionary in that way?
Well, I guess when you're going to the trade shows and that sort of thing, you've got your finger on the pulse of new brands that are coming up, and brands come and go. And is this one going to last, or is this one going to fall over in 6 months? And
But you'd
so
still
you've
have to
got to-
develop like an innate sense.
Well, you do, and that's largely based on who's behind the company and how successful they've been, and whether or not they can get it together. Some skateboarders can't put their pants on by themselves in the morning. Others, do have that entrepreneurial spirit, and they're going to do it and make it work. So.
What was that theory about free? You know how like some of the biggest brands have been created by freestyle skaters.
Yeah.
Yeah. You think there's a correlation there between freestyle skating and good business practices?
I don't know why that is, but yeah, definitely. You look at guys like Steve Rocco and
Rodney Mullen was with
Rodney
helped with
Mullen
that.
and Don Brown and Per Wellander. They've all been active behind super successful companies over the years. Yeah, but they're not the only there's other skateboarders. You look at Deluxe, for example. That's all Tommy and Jim, and the people that are behind them. And when I was doing Think and Venture, it was Greg Carroll, Don Fisher, and Keith Cochran. So they sort of came from a different background altogether.
Yeah, okay. So interesting. Like I've actually got a specific question written down here in regards to industry stuff is, you've been around long enough. Can you kind of like summarize the industry patterns that you've noticed over the years in terms of popularity as well? Does that make sense? So
there's certain...
or maybe the question I'm trying to ask is like, what are the popularity patterns?
There's certain seed crystals that you can pick over the years.
Have you got theories?
Triggered up? Well, no.
Okay.
Well, there's if you could pick it, you'd be a genius and you make $1 million. But I don't know. There's just different triggers. What caused skateboarding to die at the end of the 80s? Was it vert? Or was it street coming up? Or it was there's just all different factors, and obviously the Rocco factor when he came in and started World Industries, that changed and sort of spurred this new direction for skateboarding, which sort of grew into something, and then that sort of had its ups and downs, and then you had the Tony Hawk PlayStation era, and then the Dogtown and Z-Boys era when Stacey first did that film. That really brought in the whole retro and cruiser board market, and that really grew for a few years. And then we saw the penny explosion after that, in Australia with penny skateboards, and so a lot of shops did well. So there's always these little things that set it off in a new direction. So it's really hard to predict where it's going at the moment.
It is, yeah. I mean, who knew that Stacey Peralta was going to make that movie sort of thing, and that triggered...
so just to give you an example of that, he went and made a Bones Brigade movie about the 1980s skateboarding, and I'm like, right, here it comes. This is going to... And it sort of fired up the collector's market, but it didn't fire up the young kids like the Z-Boys movie did. So... Which was, you had a lot of surf kids, buying Z-Boy, Z-Skates and Alva boards and, stuff after that era.
Yeah, so. I feel like that movie just kind of told the origin story.
It was amazing.
And I think that's what people needed. Whereas then the Bones movie that you talk about, is that the documentary about the history of the Bones Brigade?
Yes.
Yeah, which, I mean, I loved.
Yeah.
My first...
But it didn't have that same energy that sort of, it wasn't...
Well, I just think because it wasn't really telling the birth story.
Yeah.
It was just even though it was so groundbreaking.
Yep.
It didn't cross over to the surf culture. Maybe that's why.
That could be.
Because there was a crossover.
Yeah, definitely with the Z-Boys. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Like, from your perspective, like, what's changed most in the skateboarding industry?
Well, with businesses being done completely different to how it was 40 years ago, and it's being done completely differently to how it was being done 3 or 4 years ago. So, it's really tricky.
Navigating the online market?
Yeah. Yep. So that's, we've had so many skateboard shops close in the last 3 years. It's been pretty devastating on the brick and mortar retail industry. The shops that have always done the best in the last 10 years have had a good online story and a good brick and mortar. You've got to be able to deal people face to face and be good at online. So that's changed the whole environment where skateboarding operates these days. So, yeah.
You think there's bricks and mortar operators that haven't clued into the online or aren't doing it that well?
The ones that aren't really clued into it don't last. So you've kind of got to be doing both, and you've got to be pretty switched on to how you market these days. It's different. The kids are getting their information and stuff. There'd be very few kids, I would imagine, that have a subscription to Thrasher and get a hard copy delivered in the mail.
Totally.
There's some kids that are into that stuff, but most of it's consumed online these days. So.
What about how brands and riders are connecting with communities?
Well, that's always going to be there. So, and it's really trying to capture those kids that are in your community and getting them to support the local shop, So it's whether you run events and comps and all that sort of stuff, or engage with them on social media, which is harder for older guys like myself. So,
is it? Why?
I try to keep my finger on the pop, but it's just so fast moving. There's always new platforms that you've got to sort of deal with, and
And do you find it overwhelming?
I find it overwhelming, but I also find it satisfying when I figure stuff out and work out how to use it. And this whole AI movement at the moment, it's amazing the stuff that you can do. But how do you transfer that into making dollars for your local skate shop? So so I'm always working with shops and coming up with ideas and sharing what shops are doing to make them work with other shops, and trying to keep the scene healthy. And I've got my people out there, which is good. So
you got your people out there.
Yep.
In terms of what, helping shops?
Well, just shops that support what we do, and we do our best to support them. And it's we've sort of always got to be giving product to riders and supporting competitions and that sort of thing. But at the same time, you're not Mother Teresa, and you've got to there's a commercial element to it that the shops need to understand and the riders need to understand. And I always sort of say, if you're going to put 5% of all your turnover back into marketing, when you give a kid a board, you're going to sell 20 boards to justify that, and that doesn't even cover the cost of the other marketing you're doing. So
wow, that's a reality check right there.
It is, yeah.
If you give away one board, you've got to sell 20.
That's if you were putting 5% back into marketing, and if that's part of your marketing, So that can be a big cost, and spending too much money on marketing sunk a lot of companies over the years. So
I'm excited about live events.
Yeah,
I feel like maybe I'm a bit out of touch or something, but I feel like there is more enthusiasm around more events, community-based events, and I'm not just talking about skate comps. I'm talking about like more skate jams. Skate jams, and I also really like the idea of like have you heard of that podcast, The Bunt?
I've heard of it.
And they did a thing in Melbourne, and they've been doing it in America for years, where they have a skate jam, and then a 3-on-3 comp where basketball comp, where the skaters actually have skate teams, or the brands have their own basketball team, and then it's a party, and I don't know. I just think those events, and like Belco Bowl Jam again, the street, obviously the Bowl Jam's always been there, but the street jam, how much that has built. Yeah, well,
they've added the street stuff in, and then they've got the vert ramp down there now. So that was just so refreshing. I haven't seen a vert demo for years, and I was like, this is so good.
How sick is it?
There was even skaters practicing on the Saturday, and I'd go over that kid Moto that rides for Hasoi.
Oh my God.
It's just beautiful skateboarding, just makes everything look amazing. So, went that, and then Sunday they had the vert con, and I'm like, I haven't watched a great vert demo for years. This is amazing.
Sick,
So it's
I don't know if it's on the back of the COVID lockdowns or something, but I feel like people are ready to come out and watch too. Like people,
Well, yeah, we've had good events. Back in the day, there was always the surf, dive and ski events at the Horden Pavilion.
remember.
And then, Chad sort of did Bowlerama down at Bondi. And, people just... Everybody's a critic when those events are going on and, people are saying you should be doing this, you should be doing that. But at the end of the day, it's bringing all the skaters together for those events. And, I'd go to any of those events and you'd see people that you'd only see at those events once a year.
How
I've been to Bowlerama and caught up with people I haven't seen for 20 years. And I'm like, it's so good.
yeah. No, it is. There's some magic to it. I feel like it's soul satisfying. If you need to answer that, you can if you want.
It might be a question coming through.
I love this. It might be a question. So Aha's got live questions rolling in. I love this.
There's one there from Dave Pang and Matt at Trinity.
Yeah, let me read it. Oh, no, you want to read it to yourself?
Hey, I'll just check that that's what it's about first.
Nothing incriminating, I'm guessing.
No, that's let's have a look.
Dude.
Oh, yeah, well, there you go.
Okay, here we go. Oh, no, I think, is that it? Because I just noticed.
Yeah, that's
okay.
Dave Pang. So.
All right, here we go. So this is a question from legendary Canberra photographer Dave Pang. Takes amazing photos, has done forever. And he has said this: what are your thoughts on Grind King loaded trucks?
Grind King, I think he's talking about the new one, the new Grind King truck.
Is that with the little divot in them?
Yeah.
And Leon Paxton actually just did a review on them.
Yep.
Have you seen them?
I have.
And have you seen them in the flesh, like real ones, or just online?
Yeah.
Okay.
I saw them down at World of Wheelcraft had a set. I was having a
Thoughts?
bit of a look at it. Well, I know Donald from Grind King. We used to distribute it back in the day. Skunk was a Grind King rider, so he loved Grind King. So there was a handful of riders that they always had the lowest and lightest trucks back in the day. So they had their fans. But Donald's a mad scientist, so he's he'll come up with concepts and ideas that other people aren't doing. He was first to sort of really reintroduce inverted kingpins in the 1980s, and like I said, he had low trucks that were super light. He was the first kind of in that era, around the Venture time, or maybe Ventures came in first, but he's certainly a player around that time. So anything Donald does, I'm fascinated with. So yeah. So the other mad scientist out there is Joey Pulsifer at Ace. So I'm always, whenever Donald's something, I'll send Joey a message. I'm like, have a look at these.
I mean, I feel like Ace is now officially more popular than Indy.
No.
It's still not?
No.
I just feel like everywhere I look, everyone's got Aces.
Yeah, all the cool kids ride Ace. It's all the old dudes that bleed indie red that still, you're never going to win them over.
Yeah, okay. There's a bunch of questions here from Dave Pang actually, but I'm gonna mix the questions up a bit because I have another question from past guests and pretty much the OG of Australian skateboarding, legendary Adrian Jones, and I actually did a full studio production episode with Adrian, so I recommend going and watching it on YouTube because Adrian brought in all this old footage and we played it and he talked about it, and it's footage from Hully's Ramp and Rydalmere Bowl and all sorts of epic stuff. But Adrian has said this, I'm going to read it. It says, from your teenage years right through to the present, congratulations on your decades-long passion and involvement in the world of Australian skateboarding and in particular its industry. Over the years, I've often heard that the odds are stacked against long-term survival in our industry. What's your secret and how do you do it?
Got to be tough. You got to be have low expectations because things don't always go your way. So if you go in with low expectations when things do go your way, it's like a massive win and it feels a lot better. Just to repeat what I said earlier on, get up, dress up, show up. You've got to grind it out, and you've got to go out, and you've got working for people with a warehouse full of products, and you've got to get them out to the shops. So you've got to be out there and active with the shops and build relationships, and
low expectations. I mean, I think expectations are an interesting concept in general in life.
Yes.
I mean, is it something that translates into other areas of your life?
Well, I think so. I think if you don't expect too much of people and then they end up surprising you, then that's better than having high expectations and being disappointed, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's more of it keeps you more of an even temperament, I reckon.
I think so, yeah.
Because I feel like that sums you up. You have quite an even temperament. You're quite consistent.
I try. Yeah,
I can tell.
I'm not always like that, but we're all trying to improve ourselves and be better. So.
Not all. I don't reckon.
Yeah.
Some people aren't.
Really?
No, I'd say some people have just kept the same negative behaviour patterns and never tried to improve.
Right. Yeah.
So, but yeah,
always little bits. Small increments, and just keep pushing forward. But yeah, no, I think building relationships is probably the key to it,
100%.
If you're selling stuff to a shop and you stitch them up with a bunch of stuff they can't sell, you're not going to get another order next time you walk in. So, so you're always coming up with creative ways to try and help shops.
Yeah. Can you open that back up so I can get those pangy questions up again? Yeah. I don't know your password, but maybe, just... Yeah, I love this. Thank you, Dave Pang, for writing all my questions for me. Another one from Dave. He said, "So what happened to Gullwing trucks? Did we cover that? No, we didn't. Did we?
Yeah. So
they just?
I guess
they didn't survive.
Sector 9 bought it.
Sector 9,
which was part of Board Riders, the Billabong, Quicksilver,
and then Indy took over.
No. So they were doing it, and then they sort of went more into downhill trucks and that sort of thing. So Walt Teague, who owned Gullwing, sold that to Sector 9, I think. That was sort of early 2000s. So when the whole, Element and the Board Riders thing was firing, Gullwing was still pretty active up until about 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And then they've sort of disappeared. I think they're still going, but I don't know who owns them or what capacity are going. Yeah.
Do you remember the Australian team riders that you had on?
Gullwing?
Yep.
Matt Davis
Check.
used to give some. Well, Gullwing had multiple distributors too. So
okay. Well, who were the ones you were giving Gullwings to?
I just really remember Matt Davis. Who else?
Sid Tapia.
Well, Sid was later on, and
I remember seeing a
Bart
Gullwing
Carnes.
ad.
Yeah. So I sort of had, my 4 sort of censored guys, and then I'd have other guys that I'd sponsor with other brands. So Bart Carnes and Sid. So sort of had a street guy and a vert guy.
There you go.
Yeah.
Mixing it up.
Yeah.
I've got another one from Adrian Jones. He said, "Do you have a favourite era and why?" And then he wrote, "P.S. This question has nothing to do with Taylor Swift."
Right. I don't know a lot about Taylor Swift. So
I think she's got, I don't know
I'd have
much.
to ask Ash, my 12-year-old son. He'd probably be more switched on to that.
She's got a song or an album called Eras or something.
Yeah, maybe.
Good one, Adrian, you joker.
All right. Favourite era now.
Whoa, that's a heavy. That's a heavy call.
It has to be, because where we are now, it's sort of influenced by all these past eras. It's sort of. I think I was saying around 2012, you could buy a skateboard from any era. You could buy a little 1960s solid plank board, or you could buy a 1970s replica, or you could buy a 1980s reissue, and then you could buy the 90s, directional double kick boards. And so I think from that time onwards, there's, obviously, the bulk of my skateboarding would have been done mid-80s to mid-90s or late 90s. So, some of my favourite skaters and from that era have got a special place.
Nice. It's a good question. I love it.
It is. It's hard to sort of define it right down. If I had to say, probably the most influential era on me would have been 88 to 93.
Yep.
Yep.
I really think there was so much change going on in that time, hey?
Yep.
And progression. I just felt like every week you'd hear about something new. Like, there's a new trick.
Yep. Yeah.
It's called a hard flip. You know, it's like, what? It's a frontside kick flip, shove it. It's like, what?
Yes.
How?
Yeah.
But-
But Hate Street videos would come
Yeah.
out and it'd just be like so technical that, by today's standard, then
Yeah.
nowhere near it. But,
Yeah. There's really rapid progression, right?
And the boards changed so much in that era. You know, we went from the 1980s pigs right through to the popsicle, between 88 to 93. So, yeah.
It was a big change.
Yeah.
In terms of standard of skating, I mean, I was saying this to someone the other day. I want to make mention of it. This generation of Australian bowl and vert skaters coming through, in my opinion, is like that very rare. It's a rare group. I think they're going to be the biggest standouts, game changers that we've seen in. I don't know. Is there a 7 or 10 year cycle or something? But I feel like this group.
No, the kids in 10 years' time are going to be better than them. So
this is where you're like, no, there's no way. Because I'm going to call some people out. So Taj Wolfenden, Harvey Campbell, Hudson Walker, and Arissa True, Crafter. Is it Chloe Crafter?
Chloe Clavel.
Chloe Clavel Street. But then there's another vert girl, Crafter. Chloe Crafter? No,
not sure.
Crafter. Anyway, amazing. Samson Scott, Louis. Sorry, and I really apologise if I've got the names wrong because they're just so young.
Yep.
But I mean, they are hungry. They're skating park and vert as well as each other. I don't know. I just feel like in the next 5 years, we're going to just see some.
Well, yeah.
It's already started.
All those kids are amazing. And then why I say now's the most exciting era is because they've got all that history to fall back on and they can draw from it,
Eddie Akers.
Yeah, they can learn tricks so much quicker because, it's already been done, it's sort of,
It's amazing.
It was like took Hawk, 20, 30 years to learn how to do a 900 and then you got little kids like Huddy that are spinning them at 10 years old.
Yeah, I got emotional actually because I was there when Hudson did the 900 in Bondi Bowl.
Yep.
I was with Sean Mussett as well, Gravel Burns. He's been skating for 50 years.
Yep.
He had tears streaming down his face because it was just like I never thought I'd witness that trick live.
Yeah.
Especially in Bondi Bowl. And I don't think anyone ever thought it'd happen in Bondi Bowl.
Yep.
But by a 10-year-old,
Yeah, it's amazing.
And then you're saying in 10 years' time, there's going to be another moment like that.
Already kids spinning tens and stuff like that, So, what's next? You just keep spinning. It's just mathematics, right?
Well, I mean, let's face it. I mean, are we going to see kickflip 9? Where else is it going to go? Like
for sure, absolutely.
We're going to see kickflip 9. I mean, it's going to happen.
Yeah. It's funny. I've got a funny story about that. So Taj
Wolfenden.
Yep. So we're sponsoring him, giving him Dogtown boards.
I noticed.
And he was trying to land the 9, so he sent me his footage of him almost landing it. And then I sent it off to the Dogtown guys. I'm like, check this out, Taj is getting close. And then Jim Muir, so Red Dog, sent back sick with like at least 4 or 5 eyes in the middle.
Yeah.
So he's impressed, and I'm like, come on, Taj, you've got to put it down for Red Dog.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, but you'll get it.
Yeah.
If he hasn't already, he's probably out there, already done it.
Yeah. I mean, he's so well-rounded in a lot of ways. And that's, again, the other thing. Like,
and he makes it look good too, I think that's super important. A lot of kids can do it's sort of, but you got to make it look good too.
And they're aware of that. And they're also mixing in like this combination of like modern tricks, a bit of old school stuff.
Yep.
So that they're aware to do that.
Yeah. Well, it's gonna set them apart from the kids just doing the tech tricks if they've got a few nice flowy tricks and a bit of old school stuff in their run as well. So, especially if you've got old judges.
Well, I mean, when you sponsor kids, do you talk to them about how to market themselves?
A little bit, yeah. So,
what sort of advice do you give them?
Well, just don't be a jerk, sort of be grateful for everything, if other opportunities come up, do the right thing by the people that have been looking after you. I think Kerry from Omni was giving Taj boards, and I said, look, you know, you got to go and talk to Kerry and say thank you so much for looking after me, you know, but you know, these other opportunities come up. So yeah, so you tell them to try and do that. You know, they'll learn. You know, as Tony Alva always had a thing. You know, you got to be professional off the board and on the board.
Yeah,
he wasn't all the time, but you know, but that's something.
And then ironically, that's actually good marketing.
It's something you've got to drill into the kids. You know, it's like it's a privilege to ride for a company and get free stuff. You know, not everybody gets that, and you know, you've got to be grateful for it. So,
yeah. Nice, man. Wow. Insights. Listen, I got another one from Pangy. Dave Pang, thank you. Call this the Dave Pang podcast.
Yeah.
He said, favourite music to skate to?
That's a tricky one. I haven't skated to music for so long. You know, sometimes when we do a little curb jam, we'll just have stuff blasting in the background. You know, I like old 80s punk and...
Yeah.
You know, Public Enemy and Dead Kennedys and, you know, Hard-Ons are probably my favourite Australian band, so they're always a pretty high energy sort of thing you could listen to. I don't know. You know, there's so much good music out there, you know.
Yeah.
Metal, Metallica,
totally.
Black Sabbath. I love Ozzy. Ozzy's amazing.
Yeah.
Crazy Train, that'd be a great song. Could skate to that all day long.
Sick. I've lost your phone again, but I will go back to some of them because you sent a few through. Yeah, just tell us quickly about that board up on your wall. It's a Dogtown board with the Ozzy Osbourne collab.
Yep. So
how did it come about?
That's probably the best thing I've ever been given in the skateboard industry, and I've been given a lot of stuff over the years. So Jim at Dogtown has a little room up the back where he does a lot of metal flake boards and he does limited edition boards, and you know they spend hours painting and polishing and finishing off these boards. So they did a collab with Ozzy Osbourne, and
That's amazing.
When I visited the factory, he offered me a white Ozzy Osbourne board, and I go, "Oh, this is beautiful! I love, you know, it's just." You know, they polish them right back with, 3,000 sandpaper and polish them out with wax. And I said, I remember that purple one you did. That was the first one. That was amazing. And he goes, hang on a sec, wait here. And then he came out with a purple one. I go, you've got a purple one. And he's like, here you go. And it was signed by, the white one was signed by Red Dog, Jim Muir. And the one he gave me was signed by Red Dog, Jim Muir, but it had another signature on the tail. And I'm like, is that? And he's like, yep. And so it's got Ozzy Osbourne's signature
amazing,
on
dude.
the tail. So I was just, if I had have walked out of that warehouse and got hit by a bus, my life would have been complete. It's the best thing ever.
It's insane. It's so,
so it's got pride of place on my wall there.
Yeah.
Yep. So,
it's just so aesthetically pleasing, and I did take a photo of it.
Yep.
And if you don't mind, I might post it
absolutely.
so people can.
Yeah,
so if you're listening, I might post a picture of it so you can have a look at what we're talking about.
The most beautiful skateboard ever made with Ozzy's signature on it.
It really is,
yeah. It's fantastic.
Yeah, excellent. So I'll post it. I'll post that on my Instagram so you can have a look at it and appreciate the beauty of it. Just there's so much depth to your story and your involvement, and I know your life isn't all about skateboarding.
Yep.
You have a wonderful family as well.
Yep.
How do you find juggling your time between business and giving that energy to your children as well?
Well, kids are always the priority, so we've just got to. I've got one that's 12 and one that's 5, so I've got to get them to the end of high school before I kick them out. So, you've just got to be there for them and, just do the best you can with what you've got to get them to that point in their life. And
I like you said that kids are always first.
Well, yeah, they have to be. That's when a kid's born. That's what do they need? They need their parents. That's what's going to help them survive, and that's all they need in life. So you've just got to be that person for them. So.
Do you think they care that you've got a signed Ozzy Osbourne board on the wall?
Well, Rex, when he was about 3, he just went Ozzy Osbourne mad. I've got a video of him, took his shirt off, and he's just throwing his hands in the air like Ozzy singing along to Crazy Train.
Yeah.
So he was, and then it was just, he went through this really weird period. He'd be watching like interviews with Ozzy Osbourne and Sharon on YouTube, and I was like, oh, this kid is the best ever. And then, a few months later, he was, no, Ozzy, he's old. It's old news, Like, broke my heart.
That's classic, man. Like, having children for me has actually made me more than ever consider, like, what am I leaving in this world? Like, what's my legacy? And I mean, a lot of people will say that their children are their legacy. But I guess my question to you is, like, how do you measure the impact of your work, not just financially, but like culturally?
It's all about the friendships and relationships that you develop through the industry. It's I reconnect with people all the time that I haven't talked to for 30 years, and that commonality is skateboarding and industry, and so I don't think you need to leave any sort of physical. It's.
I think it's about the relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what gets you through life. You sort of, you have a handful of people that you deal with over the years.
Yeah.
So you try and make the most of it and enjoy the time that you spend with them, or enjoy the business that you do, or enjoy looking after them, giving them skateboards or whatever. So.
Well, photographer Aaron Brown said this about you. He said, AHA puts other people before himself. Always has.
I don't know about that. I'll try.
But I mean, even if it's true or not, he reflects upon you with like such a fondness and a kindness, and everyone I speak to, and the image I've always had of you has been that. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a lot of history.
That's a pretty good legacy.
We've been through some pretty.
That's a good way to be remembered, though.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
I'll take that as a compliment. You have to.
Good, take it, man.
You don't get that many, so you've got to take them when you get them. So.
Yeah, especially with Aaron Brown.
Yeah. He's a legend.
He he just like sort of reappeared. He took a skate photo of Darren Caney recently.
I know, that was me. I talked to, just a message back and forth with Darren about that.
But it was so good to see, like,
because he sort of
Aaron back a little bit.
He dipped out. Well, he didn't dip out of photography. He's always been doing his
skate
stuff,
photography.
but, just to see him shooting skate again.
Yeah, I know.
It's so good,
and it's different. Like, you look at that photo he took of Darren.
He's got a different eye.
So, when he told me he took that photo of Darren, he goes, it's just a backside disaster on that weird quarter pipe. And in my mind, I was like, a skate park photo? Yeah, okay, whatever. Mm-hmm. But it's not a skate park. It's not just the skate park photo. Like, really, the images of this, the sculpture of this quarter pipe, it's very unique.
Yes.
And he's really emphasised the curve in it and stuff.
Yeah.
And it hits differently.
Yep.
And it's like only someone that has like a bit of a genius eye can pull that kind of stuff off.
Yeah. He's had a lot of practice over the years.
Yeah.
So
Tell us about the photo he took of you at Ulladulla that got published.
It's on there. Aaron gave me that framed copy of it for my 50th birthday. So that was the only skateboarding photo of myself that ever got published. I think it was in Australian Skateboard Mag back in the day. So we did a tour to Tasmania. So I think it was, who was it? It was Brett, Harry, Skunk. No, I'm not sure if Skunk was there. Gordo was on board. So, and then we were on the way back. We went from Tassie to Melbourne to Ulladulla.
Yeah.
And Ulladulla was one of my favourite spots to skate back then. It's always been a go-to, something special about that place. And I don't know exactly what it is. I did some research, and some of my family lived down there 100 years ago or something like that. So I don't know what it is, but that anywhere down on that south coast area is just a beautiful part of the world. So
dude,
there's something special about there. And then, we did a little demo there with all those guys, and I was skating at the end. So it was sunset and the light was right, and Aaron had all his gear. So he used to always hassle me, come out and I'll take some photo. And I'm like, there's way better guys to take photo. Go and take a photo of Brett, or go and take a photo of Skunk. So I never really shot anything with him. So, So yeah, but that was got printed in
And
the
it
back.
looks, and just for those of you listening, I'll create the scenario and the situation. It's hung beautifully on this sandstone wall in Aha's, I guess, downstairs living area, and it's special.
Yeah.
Good.
Yep. He's given me so many photos over the years, and you know, I never get around to framing them or whatever. But because he gave me that one already framed, it went straight on the wall. It's a bit pretentious putting a photo of yourself up there, but you know, it's a pretty special photo.
You look you look different.
Yeah.
You know, it's good. It must be. I think it's good for your kids to see you.
Yeah. Well, that's close to 30 years ago. So
Yeah, like because I think it's good to see that your kids, you know, your kids are going to look at that and go, "Oh, Dad was young once," and Dad, because they just see us as old. They do.
I think they just see us as us. They don't really have that concept until they're a little bit older. You know, they just like I said, you've got to be there for them, and as long as you're there, that's the most important part, right?
Yeah, man. Yeah, as long as you're there, you just show up.
Yeah.
Is that parenting advice with Aha?
Yeah,
just show up.
So you've got to put up with a lot of, you know, piss and crap and vomit and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, I was sort of lying in bed this morning and trying to relax. I put a guided meditation on, you know, just preparing myself for the day, the weekend, relaxing. Ash runs in, jumps on top of me and lying on top of me, and then Rex runs in and jumps on top of him. He's riding Ash like a surfboard, and I'm like, I'm trying to relax. But, you know, as they get older, that's not going to happen again. And they're the moments that you're really going to miss, right? So
well, do you see?
You've got to make the most of those, and you know.
I just see it as a timeline.
Yep.
In my mind, I'm like, they're not going to want to borrow me. I mean, I didn't want to borrow my parents from pretty much the age of like 15.
Yeah.
So then in my mind, I'm like, well, my daughter's 10, so I've only got like 5 years with her.
Yep.
You know, she still wants me to be around. She's still.
But I think too, generation to generation, you know, you're going to do things differently to how your parents did it, and you know, we've got access to a lot more information and people that know how to look after that period of your kid's life. So you just got to work with what you got and tap into it. And, you know, you know, kids are going to go through stages, and you went through stages, and yeah.
Yeah, nice, man. Listen, a few rapid fire questions.
Yep.
Okay. Dave Pang, again, quickly. Dream setup.
Oh, no, just pick one of the ones over there.
Well, tell us one. Because you've got a bunch there.
The one that I've been riding the most is a...
Speaking of the microphone.
Right,
God's sake.
Sorry.
Do you want to put a pillow behind your back? Will that help?
Yeah, that might help.
There you go.
Got one there. There we go. It's comfy. So probably board I've been riding the most is a 1991 Blockhead Rick Howard reissue.
With Indy trucks.
No, of course not.
Joking.
Ace trucks, AF1s. It's got some Richter Cloud wheels on it. They're about a 92 gerometer.
Yep.
So when I'm skating car parks and curbs and stuff like that, a little bit rougher area, those nice soft wheels sort of help. So that one's good. I've got a Dogtown Bigfoot board, which is an 11.75 wide board with Ace 80s on it, and it's got some OJ... They were called Little Duties. So I always wanted a set of GNS rollerballs, which were the completely spherical wheels from the 1980s. But if you find a set, they're, you know, $500 or something like that these days. So,
Nice.
So OJ did a sort of replica of them a few years ago. So I grabbed some of those and chucked it on it, and people were like, what are those weird round wheels? So that's a fun board to ride. Yeah.
Sick.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. Next one. Most underrated Australian skateboarder to date.
Ooh, underrated. I don't know. I rate all the skaters.
Mark Harris.
Well, no, he was, you know, he was doing his
was
thing back
sick.
in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Remember he did it in a Juice video? One of the Juice videos at the end, it was just like the credit section. and then he did I think it was like a fakey 5-0 kickflip out. And I remember it was the Premier, I'll never forget this moment, played at the Beach Road Hotel.
Yep.
And when that particular trick happened, the whole place just went, whoa!
Yeah.
Because people weren't really flipping out that much. And he did it clean as a whistle.
Yeah.
Harry, if you hear this.
Yep. There you go.
I'm sorry if I got that trick wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't
Ask
tell
him
you.
for us.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yep.
Underrated. Most underrated.
Oh, yeah, it's tough.
It's a hard question.
Skunk was always a good, what they call an ATV skater.
Hell yeah.
So he could hold his own on vert and street really well. So, but he wasn't underrated. Everybody respects what he did, so.
I still personally think he was one of the best to ever do it.
I'm not sure what you mean by underrated. Is it somebody that probably deserved
he was really
international
good, but never
recognition?
really good, but maybe never got that high level recognition. Or maybe even didn't even want it. So I'm going to make reference to a Newcastle skater that I've been skating with recently.
Yep.
He's 39 years old.
Yep.
He is unbelievable.
Yep.
And you've probably never heard of him. His name's Luke Carnell. People from Newcastle know him.
Yep.
Does not give two shits about getting a photo. I had to beg him to video him one day.
Yep.
But will skate so hard.
Yep.
I've never seen anyone skate that hard with just purely love.
Yep.
Doesn't want a photo, doesn't want a video.
Two that come to mind would be Cam Markin.
Boom. Good one.
Yeah, so he's probably one of my favourite street skaters.
He's so unique.
Yeah. Just got that real loose style, It's like it's all about to fall apart and then he pulls it in. He's like sort of the Dwayne Peters of street skating, pulls it together at the last moment.
Yeah.
Lockie Abbott.
Boom.
So, but once again, I don't think, you can't call them underrated because people respect them. They're known. So
maybe the question's more like, don't really chase it. Like you don't see those guys chasing it.
Lockie's like that,
Like Lockie goes to the jams and comps.
Yeah, I try to give him boards, and he's like, I don't know why you want to sponsor me. I'm the worst person to sponsor. I'm like, look, Lockie, just turn up and do your thing. You don't have to do anything. I go, this is the most low pressure sponsorship that you're ever going to have, and you don't have to just be yourself.
Yeah.
So,
it feels like he just turns up. He's there for the session. He's like, there's a session going on. Okay.
That's right.
And I'm there. And that session just happens to be
he doesn't want to skate. He doesn't want to skate competitively or anything like that. And, he was down at Belco and, he didn't go in and you're not trying to win cash or anything. Everybody stops and watches him.
Yeah.
I think that's the sign of a really good – if people stop and sit down, if you're at the skate park and – if the kids are skating around you and scooter kids are cutting you off and that, you're not that good. Nobody's sitting down to watch you. So anybody that can make people stop in their tracks and go, hang on a sec, let's have a look at what this guy's doing. Yeah. So whoever does that, my hat's off to you.
That's the point, man. Yeah. You nailed it. Well done. Here we go. This is a bit of a deeper one. One piece of advice that you'd like to give or you would give to a new – look, okay, I'm going to frame it. Skaters have always loved starting their own brands. Could be a clothing label, could be their own board brand, whatever.
Yep.
And look, everyone talks that the industry's in a depression and it's tough. You know better than anyone. It's a tough gig. But, we don't want to squash those dreams either. Yep. So what advice would you give to a new or emerging brand?
Well, you've got to grind it out. You've got to build up those relationships with the shops and the skaters that you want to sell stuff to.
What if they're just draining money?
Well, then you're not doing it right.
Ooh.
So you've got to figure it out. You've got to have a plan. So, it's tough.
But not impossible?
Just start playing Long Way to the Top by AC/DC and follow that. It's like instructional. Do it. It's like, you're going to get ripped off. You're going to get underpaid. You're going to, just get out there, do it.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Play long.
Stick with it. Like I said, low expectations, and don't expect the world to stop for you.
But don't not try.
Oh, absolutely. Get out there and do it. Get up, dress up, show up.
Get up, dress up, show up, dude. It's amazing. I love it, dude. All right. How you feeling anyway? You
Yeah,
had
I'm
enough?
good.
You want to get? You want
I'm good.
I just look. Sometimes with people like you, like I just have too many questions, and
Yeah.
I know that, like, I get very worried about missing things. But I know that, like, we could probably talk for 10 hours straight. But reality is,
People aren't going to
well, we've got to condense
check in
it.
for that long.
It's a summary.
I'm not going to do not going to do a Mike Vallely.
How do you feel? Do you feel like we've covered some of the fundamentals?
I think so, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff to cover. It
really is.
Trying to cram 40 years into however long. It's very difficult.
It is difficult.
Apologies if I haven't mentioned anybody or left anything out. So
Yeah. Look, I just, fundamentally, I just like to profile people, and I feel like you've really given us a good insight into your life. So thanks for sharing, man.
Yep,
It's
no
not
worries.
easy.
Yep. Yeah, I was a bit, definitely a bit anxious about doing it and, putting yourself out there. So
You don't seem anxious. You seem like a pretty cool cat.
try. It's still waters run deep, right?
Do you love curb skating? You do, eh?
I do, yeah.
Dude.
There's only 2 tricks I can do, really.
Let me guess. Let me guess. Feeble,
No.
board slide,
Yep.
front side and backside.
Backside board slide
Okay.
and frontside grinds on transition. That's it. That's my bag.
Can you do front side slappies?
I used to. My slappy game's not good at the moment. So
Don't get me started on that fucking trick.
yeah, I used to, but I stopped. I started hanging around with Harry and Davo, and they were all tech flip tricks. Nobody wants to see that.
Yeah, I
back
know.
then, but it's all come back.
Actually, I feel like in my older years, slappies become the foundation of better skating. So if I have a few weeks off skating and then just go and have a little slappy session, it gets me back into it, gets my mind, gets my confidence up again. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But I can do backside slappies like proper.
Right.
But for the life of me, I cannot work out how to frontside slappy. I even watched a tutorial on it on YouTube.
Yeah.
I just can't get on them. I don't know what it is. And I had this one session where I'm like, I'm not leaving today till I do a proper frontside slappy.
Yep.
And then I see people do them so easy.
Yeah. It's one
Just
of those,
doesn't work.
One of those things. Once you do it and you figure it out, it just come like riding a bike.
It doesn't work. Yeah, like riding a bike. Yeah, so I guess I did ask you about people who want to start out and underrated skaters, asked you about your dream setup and legacy and impact. But I guess now I just want to ask you, like, you got any shout outs for us? People you want to thank?
So there's so many people over the years that have helped me out, and Pete at Goliath, Steve Gulliver from back in the day, Davo and Nathan.
Nathan Ho.
Nathan Ho, yeah, legend.
Right.
So
Not the
good.
breathwork specialist from Miranda.
No. Nathan Ho's a skateboarding, snowboarding maniac.
Who was he originally from Port Macquarie or Coffs Harbour?
I know his mum lives up that way. I've always
think
known.
he was.
I think he was. First time I met Nathan was at Chatswood Pool back in the day.
Okay.
So, and then knew him from surf, dive, and ski later.
He was such a likable character, wasn't he?
He's great person.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
There's a few of the industry heads back in the Walt Teege from Goldwing back in the day. He was almost a rocket scientist. He was an engineer, aeronautical engineer.
Yeah.
Keith Cochran, who ran Think, Greg Carroll.
Yeah. Greg Carroll.
Yeah. New people, Trugy from Ace, Joey Pulsifar, Andy, who's the international sales guy, super good.
Yeah.
Matt and Dave up at Trinity really looked after me since 2019, so hats off to them. So I've got a lot of time for those people. Dogtown crew, Lance, Jim.
Yeah.
Amazing people.
Good times.
Yeah.
Cool. Nice, man. I just wanted to also look, Mick Mulhall, one thing I sort of forgot to mention, Mick Mulhall sent through the question of, like, tell us some stories from the road. But maybe you, just before we do start to wind it up, have you got any good stories from tours or
I've got lots of good stories.
something that's not
from
going to
tour.
incriminate anyone?
It's hard because, kids would turn up to come on tour and they'd think that Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas was an instructional video, and there are stories to tell. So
Maybe if they see you, you can tell them in person.
Well, there's a funny one. So when we used to go on the road, I remember we went into Ulladulla one time. It was on a Think tour. So I think Dandra Hobel was super injured. I used to give them a little per diem per day so they could, just buy some snacks and keep themselves going. But inevitably what would happen is they'd all chuck in and buy a couple of cases or some cabbage or something, and, we'd get pretty messy in the van. And we'd been through Canberra, so we'd picked up a load of fireworks, and, it wasn't like now where you could go on hotels.com and check in and find a place to stay. So I went to the hotel in Ulladulla, and I'm in the office trying to check in and negotiate. You'd try and get as many rooms as you could for your budget, and maybe try and negotiate a free breakfast or something. And in the middle of that, I hear these bang, bang. So a couple of guys had been letting off all these bungers that we'd brought back from Canberra, and the guy at the motel, what the hell's going on here? And I'm like, I don't think it's just a car backfiring. So I walk out, and it's Gordo and Tony Alba throwing bungers at each other, and I'm like, So that's a good one. But stories like that go on forever, and without throwing anybody under the bus.
Wow, Gordo and fireworks. I don't know. That would have been interesting back then.
Not a good combo.
Nah, it's good, man. Nah, thanks. And again, thanks for your time. Aha, love it. And hey, listen, why don't you plug some stuff? What do you tell everyone where they can, or find you, or what can they do to support some of your brands or whatnot?
Well, I guess Trinity Distribution. Then we've started up a new distro called Trapdoor. So, for want of a better term, Trapdoor sort of represents all the core brands, and then we're doing a little print shop through there. So, if people need to get T-shirts to start your own brand, or if shops need to get stuff done, they can do that there. So I guess the main brands we do, S1 helmets, all the Tumyeto brands, so Toy Machine, Foundation, Pig Wheels.
Sick.
Dogtown. I had a great meeting with Skip England from SMA during the week. So just a video meeting. So I was trying.
How old is he now?
Oh, he's pretty old. He'd be well into his 70s. Yeah. So, but it's hard to sort of talk business with him because you're fanboying out.
Yeah.
This is the guy that put the Dogtown and Z-Boys whole
the team
program together. The Zephyr Surf Shop back in the day.
And so he's still working.
Yeah. Unfortunately, he lost his house in the big fires over in California earlier
recently.
This year. Yeah.
That's heavy.
So we'll try and help Skip out and do a bit of stuff with SMA. But, Ace Trucks guys, amazing.
Yeah.
So, got a lot of time for them.
Nice.
Love Joey Pulsifer, the mad scientist there, always coming up with pretty crazy stuff. That's not my dog.
I'm gonna kill that dog. No, I'm not. Yeah.
I'm sure there's brands there that I haven't mentioned.
Well, I'll put a link. I'll put a link in this episode's show notes to, where you can find some of Aha's stuff. Trapdoor, maybe a link to the Trapdoor distribution stuff.
Trinity and Trapdoor. Yep.
Yeah, Trinity and Trapdoor, and you can go and suss it out yourself. And now that you've get a little insight into what Aha does, man. I don't know. I think that's about it for us.
All right.
So thanks so much, my man.